Hi, everybody. Hopping on today to talk about spiritual psychology principle number 14. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're having a great week. And I'm excited to talk to you about this today. So I love going through the spiritual psychology principles and sharing with you how you can apply these principles to your own healing or recovery process. This is, such a great tool to use this workbook that I've created for you and to really see how you can apply these principles to your own life. Remember, you want to find ways to apply things versus finding reasons not to apply them. That's a really big distinction in your healing process, is taking tools that you're receiving and finding ways to apply them, finding ways to make them applicable to your process. The people that I see take tools and make them work for them are the people that I see get better. Hey, Eric, glad you're here. So you want to think about that. How can I take what I'm receiving and how can I apply it to what's going on in my life? And it doesn't mean that the application has to be exactly how you received it. It means the application needs to be in a way that works for you and helps you experience a change in what's going on for you. So this is a great principle that we're going to talk about today. Nothing outside of you causes your disturbances. This was a big one for me because I used everything outside of me to be the reason why I was not feeling peaceful in my life. So I always went external and said, this is why I'm feeling crappy. This person did this. This happened during my day. This happened at work. Life is crappy. Life is hard. I always used external things to be the reason why I wasn't feeling good. And this principle says the exact opposite. So you can imagine when I heard it, I was like, what? Right? And there was a part of me that wanted to resist this principle because I had not been living my life like this. I wanted to reject this principle for so long because it wasn't really in alignment with how I had been choosing to live my life. But that's why this principle was so important to my recovery, because it really challenged my perspective. And this principle in particular really supported me around taking responsibility for myself, taking responsibility for my thoughts, taking responsibility for my feelings, taking responsibility for my reactions to things, for my behaviors, right? So if you want to stay in victim consciousness, this paradigm is really going to challenge your perspective. And for a long time, I was in victim consciousness, and I wanted to blame other people for what was going on in my life, for why I wasn't further along, for why I wasn't healing faster or at all. Right? So this was such a biggie for me. And it really encouraged me to ask myself, do I want to be in victim consciousness for the rest of my life? And the answer was no, I didn't. I really didn't. I wanted to be the creator in my life. I wanted to be somebody who was creating peace, who was creating love, who was creating joy in my life. And so nothing outside of you causes your disturbances really supported me in becoming more mindful and aware of myself. Because when I did have a disturbance, it required me to go inward instead of outward. It required me to look at myself instead of pointing the finger and saying, they did this, or they said that. So what's awesome about this is that it's really about you responding to life versus reacting to life. And that's a big difference. I had just been reacting to life. I used to even say this all the time. I would say, life is just happening to me and I feel like I'm just a bumper car, and issue after issue just keeps bumping into me. I had no awareness that things were bumping into me because of what was going on inside of me. I had no awareness at that time that my life was chaotic and dramatic and totally off course because my thoughts and my feelings were totally off course. And so this was so empowering to me that if I went within myself and I started to learn how to manage my thinking and my feeling, if I learned how to work with that instead of reject it and ignore it and be unconscious to it, that I could actually start to have a different experience of life. And I love it because it's not dependent on anybody else. It's dependent on you. You get to have peace if you want to have peace, but you have to choose peace. So you might not feel like your reactions are a choice, but they really are. And the more that you can start to observe yourself and just witness your thoughts and your feelings, you're going to have much more dominion over your behaviors. And again, if your thoughts and your feelings are negative, then your behaviors are going to be negative. It's just how it works. You're not going to have negative thinking and feeling and then choose really positive behaviors in your life. And vice versa. You're not really going to have very positive thoughts and feelings and then choose behaviors that are totally out of alignment with that. And so that's a really great thing to know, that you can work on your thinking and your feeling, and the more that improves and the more positive you feel about your thinking and your feeling, that the more your behaviors are going to be in alignment with you feeling good. But if you're totally unconscious to this process, you're unaware of it, you're not looking, you're avoiding it, you're escaping it, then you're going to feel like what's happening in your life is just happening to you. But I can assure you that it's not. So this paradigm is all about really, taking ownership that nothing outside of you is causing your disturbance. That things can happen in a life. I just had an awesome conversation with somebody about mothers, right? And I have so vastly improved my relationship with my mom. And I'm very mindful about how I interact with her, and I think a lot better about our relationship, and it's a much more positive thing in my life now than it was prior. And it's improved because I also think about it in a different way. And I don't allow things that happen between my mom and I to create disturbance in me. I just don't. So you looking at that, do you let yourself get disturbed by certain people? And that will give you some really good info about what is still unresolved in you that creates that disturbance within you. But it's not about that other person changing or being different. It's about you looking at yourself and the disturbance and the unresolved issue and changing what needs to be changed. So I love this principle too, because it really doesn't buy into codependency. It doesn't buy into a lot of things that we tend to do when we're being unconscious. So if you keep resolving the disturbances that come up inside of you, it could be shame, it could be not feeling good enough, it could be inadequacy. If you work on resolving those things, then there's no excuse or reason that you would backslide into old behaviors. So I give you a cool question here to recall a recent situation where you had a strong reaction. And the question is, what got bumped into inside of you? So it usually doesn't take very much thinking to remember a time. It might have been this morning that you had a strong reaction to something. It might have been last night. It might have been a week ago, but you want to think about what was a situation that happened where you just had a really strong reaction to it. I always use the example of when I used to work for somebody else, that I would be really sensitive to constructive criticism because it would bump into shame inside of me, and furthermore, not good enough. And so it wasn't that people at work were wrong or bad, and it really wasn't that I was wrong or bad either. It's just the way I was reacting to the issue was what needed to be resolved. And the way I was reacting to the issue is that I would shut down, and I would, shut down. Need I say more, right? You probably know what shutting down looks like and feels like, but that wasn't really the best response at work, to be shutting down that way, right? So I would have a very strong reaction to constructive criticism, and I would feel really shameful about it. And I would feel like I was so awful and I did something so wrong when I just made some minor little mistake. It was not something that was warranted the response that I was giving to it. So that I would look at what got bumped into inside of me that made me shut down in that way. So think about yourself. Like, what are your reactions to things? Is it that you get really angry? Is it that you shut down or withdraw? Look at this, right? Because this is where you can have a really big learning and breakthrough for yourself. It's not about making yourself wrong or judging yourself, and it's not about judging the other person or the other situation either, right? That's where we go when we're trying to absolve responsibility, or we're trying to blame something else. And we don't have to blame something else. We can actually use this experience to resolve this thing so that you don't have to feel like shame is being bumped into, or you don't have to feel like you're inadequate or that you're not good enough. So what got bumped into? Think about that for yourself. And this is the unresolved issue that we've been talking about in the workbook, that we've been talking about in the principles. If you are, hopping on, feel free to click on this link I have in the chat, because there's a free workbook in there that you can download, and there's spaces for you to write and explore yourself more. The people that I find really fully step into recovery are the people that are willing to dig deep, to go beyond the behaviors and look at the thinking and the feeling. When you can learn how to manage your thinking and your feeling, everything changes. But most people don't know how to do that, and that's why my mission is to help people work with their internal system so that they can resolve these things, they can clear these things, and they can have more peace and more joy and experience more love in their life, which is the truth of who you are. Yeah, so Eric, you connect with shutting down as well, like me. We'll keep working on it. Keep working on it. And use this situation, this external situation, to look at what's really going on within you, Eric. And then we shift from creator consciousness we shift into creator consciousness by making minor changes, by doing it differently, by looking at what got bumped into, by, bringing compassion to that, by practicing self-forgiveness, by intentionally doing it differently. There's a reason that, I'm at the place that I am now, and it's because I work on these things every day, and it's been 12 years. And I'm still as committed to these principles and the practices as I was when I first learned them. So it's I'm really working through the nuances of everything. Hey, Chris. I hear you. Yeah. Suffering from depression. Well, that's such a big question, right? Of what do I do when I've suffered from depression for most of my life? I hear you. I've had depression and mainly anxiety disorders. For me, my husband suffers from depression, so we talk about depression almost on a daily basis. And my thing would be what is it that you're meant to learn from the depression at this point? What is its purpose in your life? In spiritual psychology, they talk about spiritual curriculum. And somehow for us, that have anxiety disorders and depression, this is a part of our spiritual curriculum. So I would look at finding the learning for you, finding the purpose, Yeah, I get a lot of stuff in my throat too. I have that as well. I actually have worked a lot around the throat chakra, Chris, because that's always where, for me, my despair and you use the word sorrow. I have despair show up there. I also have despair show up like in the solar plexus a lot for me too. Um, Even that, like I love when I have like a specific feeling that comes up. So if it's sorrow, you can work with it in two different ways. You can work with sorrow, and again, you could do like a dialogue with this part of yourself. I do dialoguing even with like a body part. So if you have lump in the throat, you can do a dialogue with lump in the throat. And you as Chris can ask lump in the throat, like, what is your purpose for me? Why do you come up for me? What am I meant to learn from you? These types of questions can actually help you start to work with what's present for you, instead of us like rejecting the depression or wanting to get rid of the depression. Or, you know, like I used to have that experience with my anxiety where I wanted to get rid of it. It was the best way I can like verbalize it to you, is I hated it. I wanted to get rid of it. And I learned that actually intensified it for me. And when I started to have a dialogue with my anxiety, I started to learn more about it, that it was just afraid that I was going to get hurt, that it wanted to prepare me and support me. And I had to like have conversation with it to let it know that it was actually getting in the way of me healing. It didn't feel like it was being supportive. So I've got several different, yeah, cool. I'm glad you get it, because sometimes people are like, that sounds really weird. I know it sounds weird, but I think what's so important when working with our mind and working with our experience is like that we don't reject ourselves. We're already going through like a hard human condition. And so the more we can work with what is coming up for us, it brings in the compassion. It brings in like the compassion for the human condition. And the more we can bring in that compassion for ourselves, there's a great paradigm in spiritual psychology where they say healing happens in the loving, not in the judgment. Healing happens in the loving, not in the judgment. So if we're judging our depression, if we're judging our anxiety, there's not an opportunity for healing to happen there. There's not an opportunity for love and compassion to come in and heal that, or for us to learn from it. Good, Chris. I'm glad, because sometimes that exercise, and when I talk about dialoguing with feelings or body parts, people are like, okay, this is weird. And it is kind of weird, but when you do it, I have this one client I worked with, and she was just like, this is so weird, Beverly. And then she did it, and she uses it all the time now. So it's kind of, we laugh about it, because I was like, remember when you thought this was like the weirdest thing, and now this is your favorite tool, right? Because for her, it helps her be more compassionate towards herself and just look at like, okay, how, you know, what's sorrow's message for me today? Or what is lump in the throat trying to tell me? Like for me, I know like that stuck energy when I have the lump in the throat. And I often get it when I have like a lot of intense feelings, a lot of intense sadness. And it's like it gets stuck. And it does. It brings logic, but it's also supposed to bring spirituality to the situation. So I find that, yes, you can, it helps because you can bring the mind to it and like use your mind in a positive way for yourself. Versus usually we use our mind to judge ourselves, and then we just feel more shame, or we feel more whatever about the situation. So I would encourage you just like to honor what's coming up for you, even though it might not feel good, and see if you can work with sorrow, work with lump in the throat, work with depression, work with anxiety, and just see why is this, how come this is the experience you're meant to be experiencing right now? And just see what internal guidance you get from that process, because that's what the process is about. It's about you receiving your own internal guidance versus somebody telling you what you need to do about it. So, and I would, if you do any of these exercises, Chris, and you want to message me and tell me anything that came up for you, I love just hearing people's process. And I would certainly, enjoy hearing what comes up for you. So thank you so much for just even bringing this forward. I appreciate it. Anybody else? All right, guys. Well, here's the, workbook that you can download. It's the 22 Principles of Spiritual Psychology. Like I said, just when you read the principles, see how they can work for you. Instead of going to this place like, this is not for me, I don't, that's that resistance again that comes up for us. And oftentimes it's really not for any great reason, except that this is new or different, or we don't know about it. If you can be with some of these principles a little bit and have your own unique learning from them, profound shifts can happen. And that's why I'm sharing the principles with you, because I learned them when I went to school for spiritual psychology, but I was going through a recovery process at the time from substances, mental health, and trauma. And so I'm sharing with you all, how I used them in my own recovery process and how I still use them in my healing process. So I appreciate you being here today. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I have so much love and compassion for your experience, Chris. And I'm with you. I've actually been feeling like I want to talk more about my social anxiety and how much I have to work through that still. And people don't probably know that about me, that how much social anxiety still shows up for me. And so I appreciate you sharing your experience, because it's that kind of stuff that encourages me to speak out more too. So thank you so much. You're welcome, Eric. All right, guys, I'll be back with you. Actually, oh, sure. Yeah, you can message me, send me a message on my business page is fine, Chris, and I'd be happy to. Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you the link and you can print this out for yourself. And then, like I said, if you have any thoughts about what's coming up, you have somebody that wants to hear about it. I'm going to be in Atlanta next week visiting my mom. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to be hopping on Thursday. I'll let you guys know. I'm going to try to hop on. But I will definitely post something on my page so you guys know what's going on. All right. I will be with you guys soon. Thank you so much for being here and sharing yourself. It's so important for people to hear. Thank you.